2001 through 2006 Acura MDX radiator and thermostat replacement. I'm Brian Eslick from How to Automotive. I'm going to walk you step by step through the process of changing out the radiator and thermostat. Before we get started, I wanted to share with you the part numbers for the thermostat and for the radiator. I will be linking up all these parts and tools that I'm using in this video in the description. That way, if you need to pick any of those up, you can find those there. So the first thing we need to do is get the coolant draining. So we're going to lift the vehicle up. If you're doing this at home, use floor jacks and jack stands and lift the front of the vehicle up high enough where you can crawl underneath. Right about the center of the undercarriage here, there's a hole through the plastic cover here. And if you look up there, you can see the petcock. So you can screw that counterclockwise and open this up a little bit, and this will get the coolant draining out. The coolant was already drained prior to shooting this clip. So while the coolant is draining, what I like to do is take these under shields off. So now you can come over here on the side and we're going to pull these clips off. So you're going to pull these shields down. There's going to be a couple clips and you're just going to follow around the perimeter of the of this plastic shield and pull these clips off, and you're going to remove this lower shield. Once you get the lower shield removed, then we're going to go back up top and we're going to remove this top cover here. So you can use a pair of clip pliers like these, or you can use a flat blade screwdriver and pick all these plastic clips holding the cover down. So you're just going to start at one end and work your way all the way around the perimeter of the cover here, removing the clip. I like to use these clip pliers to make it easy. You just kind of put it in the middle of the clip, squeeze and pull like this, and you can pull the clips out, or a flat blade screwdriver works well. Once you get all the clips removed, now you can just kind of lift the cover up and pull it off and set it aside. Now we're going to flare the grill back. So you just grab the grill and pull backwards about an inch or two, and it's going to flare back, and the little clips at the bottom of the headlight are going to pop out. And now there's going to be some space back here so we can get back here and work and remove all the brackets. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to remove these brackets right here. There's two brackets on the left side and two brackets on the right side. We're going to remove all four of these brackets and set these aside. So after removing all the brackets, you can set them all out like this. You want to keep track of them. They're different from the left and right side, so you want to keep track of that. Now, as you can see, the radiator is moving back and forth. So what we're going to do is we're going to flex that radiator back, and that allows us to get to that upper hose here. We can also get to the fasteners for the radiator fans. So I'm going to pull the radiator back, squeeze the clamp, pull it, push it back, and then reach around the back side and pull this radiator hose off the radiator. Since we're also going to be doing a thermostat, we're going to take this top cover off too. So the four tabs on the left and right side here, you want to pop these up, and underneath that will be a 10mm nut. The ones in the center are for decoration only, so you don't need to pop the covers off in the center, just the four outer ones. And then remove the 10mm bolts or underneath the caps. And remove the cover. Next, we're going to remove this cover here on top of the valve cover here. So they have these little screws. You're going to turn them counterclockwise a quarter turn. So you'll rotate them counterclockwise a quarter turn, and now you can lift this cover up and pop it off. This little vacuum hose is going to be attached to it also. Okay, back underneath, we're going to remove some of the radiator hose and transmission cooler lines from the radiator. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this hose here. So you're going to follow it around, and then we're going to disconnect it here at this hose, the lower hose here, and then right here you're going to follow the metal pipe up, and we can disconnect it right here. So you'll squeeze the clamp, pull the radiator hose off. A little bit more coolant may drain out, so you may want to have the bucket ready. Once you got it disconnected, you can just tuck it out of your way for now and go ahead and take the clamps off the transmission cooler lines and pull this line off here. Then if you follow the hose over to the metal bracket here, you're going to take the hose off the metal bracket right here. And then we need to get the this hose here is clipped onto the fan shroud here. We need to get this off. So the way I got to this clip here is we used a little pick tool like this. And it's mainly used for radiator hoses, but I use it here. And what I do is I go up here and I push down on the tab from the top. And then I flare it out. And then I'll push upwards from on the bottom of the clip right here with the tip of the pick tool. And then I can pop this hose off. And this is what the clip's going to look like when you get it off. So we're just squeezing these little tabs inwards to allow it to detach from the fan shroud. Getting to the transmission cooler line can be a little difficult, so the way I did was I reached around the frame like this where there's a big hole if you look back inside. So what I did was I reached my hand around the frame like this and came over the top of the frame, and that allowed me to get the right angle in here to get to the hose clamp and slide this back and pop the transmission cooler line off. Getting to the hose clamp on the passenger side wasn't that difficult. You just kind of angle your pliers in there back towards the radiator fan, and you can squeeze it off and pull it back. Now you can pull the hoses off. Before I pull the hoses off, I take a pair of these crimping pliers here, and I crimp the hose. And what that prevents is all the transmission fluid that's inside the lines from draining out. So it reduces how much transmission fluid you'll lose. So I'll pop these hoses off with the clips on there. And to make it easier, I use these little hose clamp pliers here that you put between the hose and the fitting and squeeze, and it flares it and pushes the hoses off. Now back up top, we need to remove the hood latch so we can get the radiator out and won't clear it with this hood latch in the way. So we reach around the back side of the core support here, and we're going to remove the 10mm bolts. So we're going to remove the 2 here, and then there's going to be 1 over here we're going to remove. You're also going to want to disconnect the electrical connector for the vacuum switch here. So just squeeze the tab and pull the electrical connector off. And then you can go ahead and remove the bolts. So once you got the bolts removed for the bracket here, it's still not quite going to come out. It's making contact with the little bracket down here. So what we're going to do is we're going to, right behind the switch here is a 10mm bolt. You can remove that bolt, and then we can pull this bracket back, and then we can get access to the latch there and get it out. There's also going to be a few electrical connectors on the latch. So once you get all that disconnected, you're going to pull the fan shroud back, and if you look right here, there's a little tab here that's a wire loom holder. So you're going to pop that off, and we need to get this wire also disconnected. So you'll squeeze the electrical connector for the fan and pull it off, and then we need to get this electrical connector off the fan shroud. So you pull the little tab on the back of it and slide it off. So there's a little tab on the back that you flare out. So you'll flare the tab and then pull the electrical connector off the fan shroud like this. And now you can get the hood latch out, and you can swing it in. We're going to leave the cables connected to it. Now we can get the wire loom for the radiator fan disconnected. So we're going to pop the wire loom off and disconnect the fans. And on this side here, we're going to disconnect the fans and pop the wire looms out of the little holders here. So you pull those little wire looms out. So you'll follow the wire loom down to the sides of the fan here, making sure that's disconnected from it. So once you get the wiring harness free like this, now we can start getting these radiator and fans out. We're also going to pull the vent hose here off the coolant bottle here. So you can go ahead and just pop that hose off, and then you can tuck it out of your way. As you follow the wire loom down the side of the fan here, it actually has a little connection at the very bottom there. We need to pop it off the fan shroud there. So you'll disconnect it there. So in some models, you can lift the radiator and fans out as one assembly, but this one was hitting, so we need to disconnect the fans from the radiator. So I went back underneath, and there's a bolt on the bottom for the, a couple bolts on the bottom for the fans at the bottom of the radiator. So you're going to remove the 10mm bolts at the bottom of the fans. And I just used my little cordless ratchet to remove those bolts. So there's 2 bolts on the bottom for the passenger side fan, and then there's 2 bolts on the driver side fan that we're going to remove. So you're going to remove the 4 bolts on the bottom of the fan shrouds there. Then I went back up top after getting the 4 bolts on the bottom here removed. Then I flared the radiator back, and I was still trying to get the fans disconnected from the radiator after removing the top 4 bolts, and then I realized that the fans are still hitting the little bracket here on the back of the core support here. So the fans are, I'm lifting the fans up and trying to get them out and trying to get the radiator out, but it's still hitting. So to create more room, what I'm going to do is take the center support bracket out that goes down the center of the core support here, and it's back underneath. There's a 10mm bolt at the bottom here. Also disconnect the vacuum hose, and then I'm going to go back up top, and I'm going to finish unbolting the bracket here. There's a couple 10mm bolts at the top here. This is the same bracket that was holding the hood latch on. Now if there's any wire looms or anything attached to it, you can go pop that off. Now you can pull the bracket straight up and out. Now that I got the bracket out and removed, I can get to the fan on the driver's side here. So I'm going to just work it out. So I'm pushing it in towards the motor and then pull the fan out and set aside. To get the fan on the passenger side out, I slid it over towards the driver's side of the vehicle, and then I was able to lift the fan up and out of the car. Now that the fans are removed, I just pulled the radiator inwards and then lifted the radiator up and out of the vehicle. Now that you got the radiator out of the car, I washed off the core support here with water. I poured water all over this and washed it all off. There may be some leaves and debris on there and get that all cleaned up. Now I'm going to work on getting the thermostat out. So if you follow the hose back here, there's 2 bolts on this 10mm bolt holding the thermostat housing on. There's one on the top and one on the bottom. There's also some ground wires bolted to the housing. You want to remove those. It's held on with a 10mm bolt. To get to all these bolts, I just used my Milwaukee M12 ratchet here. With a 10mm deep socket with an extension, and cracked these bolts free. So I took the ground cables off first. To get to the bottom bolt, I used a little extension with a wobbly socket like this to get to the bottom bolt. So I just reached around back like this, put it on the bottom bolt, got that off, and then took the top bolt off. Now you can pull the housing back like this. You leave the hose connected to it, and you just flare it back. Or you can do what I did, was pull the hose back towards the radiator and kind of just get it out of your way. So I just kind of work it like towards you and then kind of just tuck it off out of the way. Now you can get back there and get the thermostat out. If you're lucky, you can pop it out with your hands. Sometimes it takes a pair of pliers on there to get them out. So now we're going to make sure our O-ring is on our thermostat, and we're going to take this little vent here, and it has to be facing upwards, so the thermostat is going to go in the housing like this. You don't want it upside down. If you put it in upside down, it's possible to get an air pocket. So go ahead and put it back into the housing with the vent upwards, and then you can put the hose with the outer housing on, and put the top bolt in first, and then start the bottom bolt, and then tighten the 2 bolts up, and then start your ground strap and tighten that up. Once you got the housing rebolted up and secure with the ground strap tightened up, the hoses have these little spacers here that you clip on it. Make sure you got those installed. Now we're going to prep the radiator for reinstallation. We lay them side by side, and then we're going to transfer over the hoses over to the new radiator. So when you transfer over these hoses, the brackets and everything need to be transferred over. And also at the bottom of the old radiator will be these rubber grommets here. These grommets need to be transferred over to the new radiator. If it's not on the old radiator, it may be stuck in the core support, so you may have to look for those there. So once you got all these transferred over, now we're going to take the radiator and slide it back into position. When doing this, you just want to work slow and make sure you don't snag on anything, and just slowly lower the radiator down to the bottom with those little rubber grommets that mount in the holes in the bottom of the core support. So you'll lower it all the way in until it sits flush on the bottom down there. So now we're going to take the fan that went on the passenger side and go ahead and mount that in. So if you notice, the bottom of the mounts are slotted. So what we can do is we can start the bolts at the bottom of the radiator first. So if those bolts started just a few threads and sticking outwards, now we can take the fan shroud and fan assembly here and slide it down into position and hook it on the bolts on the bottom. And if you notice, I put it in on the driver's side first and then slid it over to the passenger side and hooked it on the bottom bolts below. And then I started the top bolts on top once I got the bottom hooked. So now we're going to take the driver's side fans, and they have these little pegs on the bottom of the fan shroud, and they mount on some holes at the bottom of the radiator down there. So we're going to slide it in until those pegs land in the holes. And then once those are in the holes, then we bolt the top 2 bolts on the top of the fan to the radiator. Now that you got the fans installed, you can go ahead and make sure they're all bolted up. So go ahead and run those bolts in and tighten those up. After that, we can go ahead and plug the electrical connectors in for the fan. So we can go ahead and get this wiring harness laid back into the way it came out, and then make sure it's all secure. And once you get these all secured and plugged back in, including the wire loom holders, after we get that all secured on the passenger side, then we'll move over to the driver's side fan and make sure that the wire loom is plugged in and all the electrical connectors are connected. Then we can take the overflow vent bottle here and plug it into the top of the, route it through the core support here and plug it into the radiator. Make sure that's hooked up. After that, we're going to take the metal core support bracket that we took out and slide that back down into position. So you'll slide it down into position, and then we'll remount all the bolts holding it on the top and the bottom, and plug the vacuum lines back in. Make sure that's all secure, so you can make sure all the bolts on the bottom of the fan shroud are tight now, and the bracket is tight. And then since we're down here, we can go ahead and plug in the lower radiator hose and the transmission cooler lines, reconnect those, and reconnect all the clamps. Now you can take these lower splash shields here and reinstall those. So you'll line the covers up with all the mounting brackets, and then you'll put the clips back in all the way around. Then we'll go back up top and we'll pull the radiator back, and we can start the upper radiator hose. So now that the core support is mounted, we can take the hood latch cable and re-bolt that up. So you'll put it into position, you'll bolt that up, and then you're going to take the bracket here and the vacuum switch here for the motor mount here. We can bolt all this back up and make sure all the electrical connectors are plugged in. When you go to mount the hood latch, you got to make sure that the wiring harness goes through the metal bracket and it pulls on the front of it connects on the front of the radiator right here. So that's the hood latch switch. So you make sure that's all plugged in. Now we can go ahead and put the 4 brackets on and bolt those all back up that held the radiator and condenser into place. So bolt all that back up. Now we can take the bumper and push it back into place. Now that the bumper is pushed back in, we can put this top plastic cover back on and remount all the hardware, the clips holding it on. Then we can put the lower cover here that goes over the valve cover on. You just turn the clips 90 degrees, and then we'll put the top engine cover on, remount this hardware, and then we're ready to fill it up with coolant. So you're gonna fill it up with 50/50 Honda approved coolant. You also need to check the transmission fluid. I recommend you start the car first, let it run, and then turn it off and check the transmission fluid and make sure that it's full. And then if it's not full, you need to take this plug off in the back here and fill it up with an ounce or 2 of whatever your transmission may be low. And then we're gonna start the vehicle and let it run. And I'm gonna turn the heater on. I'm gonna put it on its hottest settings, but I'm gonna make sure that the blower fan is on the lowest settings. So the heat's on high, the fan's on low, and then we're gonna let it run for about 10 to 15 minutes until the thermostat opens up. So we're gonna run this vehicle until those cooling fans operate and run. We're gonna make sure that the AC is off and the defroster is off. So we're gonna run it until the thermostat here opens up. You can feel this hose here, and when it opens up, it'll get warm. And then the coolant level may drop, and you may have to top the coolant level off. And then you want to make sure that those fans cycle, the thermostat opens up. Once that happens, then you reinstall the radiator cap and go for a test drive. When you get back, double check your fluid level. I will link up all the parts and tools that I use in this video in the description. If you're interested in supporting or helping the How To Automotive YouTube channel, the best way you can do that is by purchasing t-shirts, stickers, and coffee mugs. I will leave links for all this in the description of the video. I'm Brian Eslick from How To Automotive. I'd like to thank you guys for watching. Encourage you to subscribe. Invite you to head over to the howtoautomotive.com website for more valuable videos like this. Thank you again for watching.